Okay, so welcome to our webinar, Breaking the Procrastination Panic Cycle, Why We Delay and What Actually Helps, Understanding Procrastination Patterns and How to Catch Them Earlier. All right, so as we're talking about procrastination, one thing that we're really going to be diving into today is that it is a blanket term that refers to a lot of different things. And for anyone that has worked with us at New Frontiers or has thought about it, we're very big on making sure that we're solving and developing strategies to the right problem. And that's a lot of what we're going to be diving into. So you know it's coming, you think about it, some task is on your radar, you acknowledge that it exists. There might be a plan to do it. Maybe it's not a well fleshed out plan, but there is a plan to do it. You're fully intending to, there's the motivation, the desire to do it. You're going to start soon, definitely soon. And then you move into this stress mode. So you begin stressing about it. The weight of this task grows, and somehow you still wait. But then something changes. The deadline gets closer. So suddenly the task, whatever it might be, feels very real and imminent. Consequences begin to feel real. Pressure builds. Not only this mental pressure, but there's actually like chemical reactions in your body, hormones coming out. Stress is building. So your body and brain are shifting into high gear. This kind of fight or flight mode kicks in. And suddenly you feel like you can focus. But why does it take that urgency? Why is that fuel at the last minute and often at the expense of our mental health, leading to stress, not in a very rational, thought out, strategic way, but a very reactionary way? And I always like to just start off that procrastination isn't laziness. Procrastination isn't necessarily a lack of motivation. Procrastination is actually a natural response from your brain trying to protect itself. Procrastination, all the different facets of it, is a learned response that we think is helping ourselves. So it feels like the brain is doing its job. It's just responding to the wrong things. And so often procrastination is in response to uncertainty, not knowing what the outcome might be, or an unclear start, not knowing what the first step might look like. Mental effort. So the task might just feel cognitively heavy. Competing priorities, too many demands pulling attention. And so you end up procrastinating one task at the expense of doing another. Or low reward. So feeling like the payoff feels distant. It's not motivating for us. Why am I doing this? What I like to always acknowledge, though, and this is often occurring within our heads, is that delay actually works sometimes, and then other times it doesn't. And we're often thinking about procrastination of when it's not serving us. That's when it gets that stigmatizing name of procrastination. But some forms of procrastination are genuinely strategic. So the problem is arising not when using the good parts of procrastination. It's when our brain is overgeneralizing the tactics that manifest as procrastination and applying them when they're not appropriate or not applying them strategically. And so, on a certain end, there is sometimes a benefit from a strategic delay, being purposeful and intentional, often with a clear time frame. So it's about optimizing what we're doing when we're using a strategic delay. I'm really tired right now and studying is not going to be effective. Why don't I study tomorrow? That is a common piece of advice and coaching that we provide to people. Hey, at 2 a.m. might not be the best time to study. Why don't you get some sleep and study tomorrow? That technically is procrastination, but it's a strategic delay. And what we're doing it when we're using strategic delays, you might be waiting for more information. You might be pacing yourself so you don't burn yourself out. You might be letting ideas incubate and mature, sitting on something. Or you might be delegating to others. Hey, why don't I just pass this over to someone else to do? More so for adults than for students. The problem is that this can often lead into, instead of a strategic delay, turning into an avoidance trap. So this is where it's more emotionally driven, open-ended, and it lacks a clear trigger to re-engage. And so really what we're looking at here is this is more of a coping mechanism to avoid discomfort. This avoidance trap might stem from fear of failure, criticism, overwhelm from how big the task is, perfectionism that could be leading to paralysis, or just a lack of clear first steps. The problem is that your brain, when working automatically, can't always tell the difference. But what we can do is begin to learn how to identify, am I going down a strategic delay or am I going down an avoidance trap? And we're going to talk about certain strategies that can help us catch that, learn when we're doing one or the other so we can strategically adapt. And I like to start off with this because there often is this inner voice that is convincing us that the strategy works. Let's delay this right now. We're not ready. And what we're trying to do is sift out when our brain may be lying to us unintentionally, but lying to us and sending us down an avoidance trap versus a strategic delay. So another thing that I want to do just off the top is this isn't just big deadlines. We don't just procrastinate big tasks. Procrastination is in our everyday moments too. And sometimes these little tasks can pile up. And that's where you can have these small delays. Oh, I'll do the laundry tomorrow. I'll do this. I'll respond to that email later. I'll start when I have more time. Then all of a sudden, these small tasks can turn into big tasks. Oh my God, I haven't gone through my emails in a month. And now something that was small snowballed into a much larger task. So these small delays do pile up quietly until they become overwhelming and we start leading more into avoidance because it just feels too much to handle. Procrastination also manifests in ourselves as patterns. So it's not just a single problem or a character flaw. You can predict these patterns and you can see your brain falling into them. It might look different in different people. And what we're doing is we're trying to recognize that pattern to catch it sooner. So when you recognize the pattern, you are gaining that first insight to do something different. When you know you're going down a procrastination route, an avoidance route, then we can tap into our rational part of our brain to prevent the poor outcomes that come from bad procrastination. And a lot of this is about identifying when we're going down so we can do something different. Procrastination often is a silent challenge that we're facing. And with a lot of the work we're doing in coaching is helping recognize when procrastination is happening. Because not only are we then pulling ourselves out of this reactionary mindset, we're then enabling us to tap into a strategic one. So this is another thing, and really what spurred this is while we've been working on it in frontiers like procrastination with clients across the lifespan, probably since we opened our doors, I had such an aha moment with a client that I was working with, where there was a lot of guilt and shame around procrastination. We've worked together for a while, and he was a little embarrassed to share over that he was procrastinating. And it was such a big aha moment of this is nothing to be embarrassed about. We all procrastinate. That morning I was procrastinating. I was able to relate to him. And so it's first, let's accept we all procrastinate. We all do it. It happens. But where procrastination becomes not a problem is when we catch that procrastination and get back on track. So it's okay to procrastinate. We're not eliminating it entirely, nor should that be the goal. Really, what we're doing is getting better at catching when we're doing it and then course correcting quickly. Great, I haven't checked my emails in 3 days. I still can do it now. I'm noticing that I'm procrastinating. Now let me fix that. So we want to be recognizing it earlier, noticing the pattern as it's happening, understanding why, and this is going to be a big part of this presentation. Identify what's driving that delay. Not, oh, I shouldn't procrastinate. Rather, why was I procrastinating? What was the challenge or the problem that now I need to problem solve? And then trying to re-engage and put out the fire sooner. Maybe it's just a little ember at first. We can put that out easily before it turns into a bigger fire. We want to get back on track before our brain really kicks into that fight or flight mode and we're not able to be as strategic. A little bit about that panic cycle that we get into is at first a task is in front of us and we might be anticipating it. And so like this need or this trigger is perceived and then we're like, I don't know if I can deal with this right now for whatever reason. And that leads to a delay, a period of waiting or postponement before we decide to tackle that task. But that delay, even if it's not front of mind, it builds up stress in the back of our heads. And it's actually tapping into our working memory. Because often what happens is when we delay something, we're almost writing it on like a little mental to do list in our head. And the more things we add to that mental to do list, oh, I got to get to this tomorrow. I got to get to this tomorrow. I got to get to this tomorrow. Not only are you stressed about doing the tasks, your brain starts to get stressed about forgetting the tasks. Oh my God, if I don't get to it, I'm going to forget about it. And so this increased pressure and tension begins where the situation begins to escalate more. And this develops more and more urgency. And this starts making it not something that we can delay anymore, but really, hey, we're about to face some real consequences from not doing this. And those consequences can be, I thought I had enough time and now I don't have enough time. I'm not going to be able to get to everything that I've been procrastinating around. And then finally, once we get through and use that urgency and we put out the fire and we use that kind of adrenaline rush to put things out, there's a relief. And the problem with the panic cycle is when the relief, the removal of that stress is completed, our brain actually rewards ourselves because it feels like, hey, you've removed stress. So, through all of this, our brain is getting signals that this strategy worked. Even if maybe, let's use a test example, you study it at the last minute. Even if you get a 75 on that test, the result of that test is so far removed from the removal of that stress that your brain was still encoding that as a successful strategy. You made it, you got through. And so the problem here is that this feeds a lie in our brains that this procrastination worked. That's why it's so hard to break out of this procrastination cycle because our brain is getting mixed signals. When I break down with people, wait, did that feel good though? They're like, no, and I don't want to feel that way. That didn't feel good. But in their brains, they already were getting some reward signals from that. So we're getting both ends. Our rational side is like, no, I don't want to do that. But our brain is relying on this as a strategy that worked. Come on. There we go. Okay. So now, why does this deadline or waiting to the last minute, why does this feel like it fixes that roadblock that we hit, that hump that we can't seem to get over? So urgency and this stress response that we feel, it's this neurological trigger. And it's creating the exact conditions that your brain feels like it needs to break out of that logjam and take action. So what actually happens is when we are feeling a more acute stress response to something, our cortisol levels go up. And what happens, and this is the fight or flight hormone that we get. and the chemical that's released. And that cortisol, what that is doing is it's just like there was a bear chasing us in the woods. So what it's doing is it's increasing our focus. It's supercharging our brain in the moment because we need our full thinking capacity and our full cognitive abilities, focus, and all of this to be able to escape that bear. But now instead of a bear, it's this deadline, it's this pressure. And suddenly that cortisol is giving us a sense of clarity and focus. The task feels very real and defined. All other distractions begin to fall away from this pressure. This is the only thing. Confusion about prioritization is removed because this has the deadline. It suddenly feels like the structure and the pathway forward is very clear because of the way your brain is reacting. And the pressure is fighting against things like when in the backyard, you're like, oh, I can just do this tomorrow. No, that's not an option. We got to get it done. Got to get it done. No, don't pick up that phone. We got to get it done. And so what's happening here is your brain is learning this dangerous lesson that panic equals productivity. But the consequence here, the victim of all of this is our mental health. We're living in a state of stress. And so while panic feels like it is productive, it has a consequence and it's not sustainable. So looping back a little bit to what I said earlier, when we have strategic delays, that's okay. So it's not that the delay is the problem. A short delay is often harmless. It can be strategic. But the problem is when the delay slowly and quietly shifts into something more destructive, and that's avoidance. So delay might be a normal pause and that could be manageable. But when we delay that task, it easily can become avoidance when the task is out of sight, out of mind. So when there isn't a clear time to revisit the task, a clear plan of what we're doing, or using that delay in a strategic fashion to then come back better, that is that avoidance spiral that we can slip into. You might even have full intentions when you're delaying to come back, but if we don't not trick ourselves, but if we don't set up systems for ourselves so that we're able to come back to the task at a more appropriate time, then it disappears. And then it comes back as last minute panic. Oh my God, I forgot to do that. And that what leads to that scrambling, stress, and low quality results. So, what we're going to be going into is that not all procrastination is really the same. Different procrastination patterns have different roots, have different causes, and they're going to have different solutions towards them. While we'll go over some general strategies that support a lot of these. It is important to really try to resonate and identify which of these procrastination patterns are manifesting with you, whether more commonly, like this is the procrastination path that I see most often in myself, or when different ones pop up in your own life. So, one size fits all advice rarely works. Just start, just make a plan because that's not addressing the why of the delay in the first place. So, we're going to explore 7 of the most common procrastination patterns and really what's driving each one. I will give you a quick one, a quick recap, a preview. As we go through these 7, try to identify, and you can share in the chat. Or if you want a little bit more on them and you want to ask a question about them, but try to see which of these you identify with most. Or if you're here learning more, maybe about a loved one, or if you're a professional here about people that you're supporting, try to see which one may resonate most. So the first one is the time optimist. This is the one that says, I have plenty of time. I don't need to do this now. So this pattern is really driven by an optimism bias. It's underestimating how long things will take you or overestimating your future availability. The time optimist is one that's assuming they have free time now, and they'll have enough time to do productive work later. So this is underestimating the time required for tasks, which leads to assuming the future you will be maybe more capable or motivated and pushing things off early because the deadlines feel far away. And really what we're doing, what we see a lot with the time optimist is their awareness of time, how they engage with time might be a struggle. Time being very abstract and not visual may be a challenge. Hey, it's 5 days out. So yeah, I have time. And we see this a lot with people, and this is global between students, adults, is yeah, 5 days might be plenty of time to do this one task. But what about the 15 other tasks you have? What if they're all due on Friday or we need them all done by Friday? Yes, each one individually might be fine with 5 days, but you don't actually have 5 days because you have all these other tasks that you need to be getting to as well. The next is the lost starter. So I don't know where to begin. So when the first step isn't necessarily clear, our brains can stall a bit. So it's not a lack of motivation, and that's what I often hear from people is they feel that oh I'm procrastinating this task. But if they have the full intention to get started, they want to, but they just don't know how to. Where this is a good strategy is hey, maybe start other tasks first and you can get your brain going and then you can come back to this. But sometimes the procrastination of an individual task is just not knowing where to begin. So really just looking at these two forms of procrastination that look the same, delaying a task, but two very different problems at the root that would require different solutions and strategies. So, with the first one, we were looking at, well, let's better plan out our week. Let's make sure we have time. Let's plan this out. That's on one end, really dealing with time management, time awareness. Whereas the lost starter is more about breaking down large tasks, making a plan, not in reference to time, but what are the different steps I'm going to do here? And so this is a planning gap that can create paralysis. The next up is the not ready yet brain. So I'll do it when I have more focus. I love this one. It's always this kind of magical thinking of I'll do it when I have more focus. Again, sometimes that can be a very good strategy. But whenever I've heard that with people I've worked with, I always ask, how do we know when we'll have more focus? And is there anything we can do to help ourselves get more focus? That's the big gap is yes, this might be a good strategic delay, but we need to plan out that strategic delay a little bit more. When we just leave this as I'll do it when I have more focus, that is quickly turning into an avoidance strategy instead of a strategic delay. So this pattern is disguising itself as self awareness. Oh, I'm not very focused. I'll do this when I am. Again, sounds great, but only if we approach that strategically. So often this is a form of indefinite waiting. The right moment rarely arrives on its own. And like this can also be, it doesn't have to be focus. I'll do it when I want to. Well, will you ever want to do this? Right? Like it's really trying to get into I'll do it when, and it's waiting for this future state. And the key with this form of procrastination is, well, how do we set ourselves up to be in that future state? This is a big area when I hear I'll do it when I'm more motivated. And that's why we always say motivation isn't a good strategy because you can't just turn it on and off. So this might be when we're waiting for the right energy level or mental clarity. Oh, let me come back to this. believing that the conditions need to be perfect before we get started, or confusing rest with readiness and readiness with action. The next up, 4 out of 7, is the priority juggler. This is when we often have too many tasks and everything feels important. And so we end up procrastinating certain tasks, maybe based off of what we are in the mood to do, what we like to do. But really, it's these competing priorities. And so when everything feels urgent, nothing gets the attention it deserves. This is a big one of leading into deadline by deadline and living by deadline, because it removes the priority question. And when something is due tomorrow, then yes, that's the top priority when we have to get it done. When you have no more clean clothes, well, yeah, now it rises to the top of the priority list. So this pattern is rooted in these unclear priorities and a lack of a plan, not lack of effort, though. So the priority juggler is reacting to whatever feels most pressing right in the moment. There's no clear system for deciding what comes first. And the important tasks keep getting bumped by urgent ones. So something might be more important, but we'll wait for that one to be urgent to get to it. And so maybe less important tasks are less urgent there. Now, um, a key thing here, and I know this might be a little obvious, but the priority juggler's biggest support is going to be focusing on developing prioritization strategies and matrices and building that prioritization executive function to help with not living in only urgent tasks. Some of you, and you can check out the Eisenhower matrix, is like it's one of the decision making frameworks, prioritization frameworks. And one of the like axes is looking at the urgency of a task. And so when something is extremely urgent and it is very important, you do it now. But the problem is the priority juggler is only doing things when they're urgent, waiting for that urgency, as opposed to doing it a bit more strategic. Okay. So next up, we have the busy bee. So it's I'll do these other things first. This sometimes is related to some of those other things of like, oh, I'm not in the mood yet, not right now. So this one can also manifest where this is productive procrastination. And I will say I have sometimes encouraged some productive procrastination, but it's more of, if we're going to delay one task, that doesn't mean that we delay doing anything. But the busy bee can be a slippery slope where we're always doing the things that feel easier. And so you stay busy, so you feel like you're doing a lot of things, but you might accomplish really good things. But the one task that truly matters, that really important one, keeps getting deferred. And so the busy bee is one that's filling their time with lower stake tasks to feel accomplished, to get that reward coming. See, I got all this stuff done, but are we getting to that one big one that we need to get to? And so by avoiding that main important task, by staying visibly productive. Hey, but at least I did this. At least I did this. At least I did this. And this dialogue of at least I did this doesn't always have to be to someone else. This could be internally in our own head, that inner monologue. And so the busy bee then sees easier wins, providing that sense of progress without the risk. So then 6 out of 7, we have the avoider. So I don't want to deal with this. And this is a very emotionally driven pattern. The task isn't just difficult, it's carrying emotional weight. It might carry guilt. Um, I've seen this sometimes coming up with um, what could be a good example? Replying to job applications, let's say. And so I've seen some that are nervous to go back through all of their emails to see if they've gotten any reply for job applications. asking for an interview because, oh my God, what if there's a rejection in there? And so now the task is also emotionally charged. And so rather than tackling the task, we're going to avoid it. And that emotional weight can make it feel actually threatening. And so this is a more mental health coping strategy of procrastination. And so the avoider has an underlying anxiety about what the task represents. There might be perfectionism, fear that the result won't be good enough. And the avoider has a fear of the outcome, judgment, or what success might. And then lastly, we have the dopamine chaser. This is a big one. Something else would feel better. Now, no one says it like out loud, or younger ones might, but something else would feel better. I'd rather be on my phone. And this is a very silent one that happens to probably all of us. So we're in the middle of something and we quickly open Instagram. Younger generations open TikTok. It's that quick dopamine fix. This task isn't giving me my dopamine reward. Let me go get some dopamine. And so the brain is wired to seek those rewards. And a lot of social media, video games, all of this stuff is wired to give us quick fixes of dopamine. So this is a quick trap. So when a task is offering a distant payoff, and this tends to be more important, larger tasks, they have distant payoffs, or even a smaller task, doing laundry. Yeah, this isn't clean clothes that I'm going to wear now. These are clean clothes. And oh my God, I did my laundry. Now I have to fold them. Then I have to put them away. The reward is so far off. And so the brain, of course, would prefer something that's giving us immediate satisfaction. And so the dopamine chaser is reaching for the phone, scrolling or browsing, putting on the TV, YouTube. They gravitate towards easier, more stimulating tasks. Quick rewards constantly beat those long-term goals in the moment. This is a tough one, and we have to actively fight against these dopamine hits that society has built in for us. So, with all of those, what we're looking at, though, is we need to understand that procrastination, and by identifying these 7 different versions of procrastination and how it manifests, it is information for us. When we can identify with or identify in the moment which of these procrastination manifestations, which one is there, then we can begin to do something about it. And so these patterns are signals. And so instead of judging yourself for the delay, instead of judging yourself for picking up that phone, let's get curious about what the delay is telling us about ourselves. So is there a clarity issue? Is there an energy issue? Is there a priority issue? Is there emotional resistance? Or is there a reward imbalance? And really, by going through all of these, we can learn more about ourselves and set ourselves up better for success. So, just to go back to this delay concept again. So, when we delay, the task is paused, but it's still visible in front of us. There could be a disconnection then, where while we're thinking about the task and we delay and we think we're delaying strategically, it then can become a disconnection where the task slips out of our awareness. And that leads down that panic cycle. And so the turning point isn't necessarily how long you're delaying or how long you're waiting. It's whether that task is still in our awareness, because once it slips out of sight, re-engaging becomes significantly harder. So I might know that I have laundry to fold, but as long as that is in my mind that it's there, I'm not falling down that very destructive, complete out of sight, out of mind, where it can keep piling up and become a problem. And this is going to be the root in one of the main strategies that we're going to look at with procrastination. So, one of the first systems is we want to keep tasks visible. We don't want them to disappear. One of the big things that I work on, and this is just one type of strategy that I've worked on with individuals, is having a master to-do list, big and small tasks, one place that we can see everything that we need to do. Now, you might want to separate it between like work and school or personal stuff, family related stuff. But we do want to have one place that we see everything we need to do. Because then when we delay a task, we can add it to this one central system that we're keeping track of that. This prevents the out of sight, out of mind. So, really, what we're looking at is we want to prevent avoidance by not letting ourselves avoid so that there's somewhere that we can see or visit. So having that one central system, single trusted to-do list or task manager, not scattered notes. Um, One client, we worked on this and we had a central to-do list. It was working great. Like he really liked it. It really was supporting him. The problem came up when magically he had a second to-do list form. And that to-do list was out of sight. He didn't visit that one often. And what we found is, hey, literally the only things on that second to-do list were tasks he was avoiding and procrastinating. So magically a week happened. But we had worked together that he had this awareness and he owned it and was like, yeah, I don't know what I was thinking. I must have subconsciously sabotaged myself by creating a second to-do list separate from my one central one. Another is constant reminders. So schedule these prompts that bring the tasks back into view. This could either be task based. So I'm going to revisit this task because reminders, whether on your phone, on your calendar, reminders make it visible again. The other thing, though, that often works, sometimes people don't want to put every task in as a reminder. The other thing that works is make reminders and routines around looking at your one central system. That works too. It's preventing the avoidance. And that is a form of using regular check ins to review everything holistically, to take anything out of our working memory that we delayed and didn't get to, but making sure we don't leave that buried for too long. To take this even further, I will sometimes encourage going through that one central system and just going through item by item, rewriting that master to-do list, doing things like this to make sure we're engaging with tasks and thinking about, do I have a clear next step for them? System two is to reduce starting friction. So what we always want to try and do is define the first step. So when we are adding tasks to our list or when we are mapping out what we're doing, often what I encourage is even if we're not going to start right now, let's try to define very concretely what is the first step of the task. Small as possible action. Make that small because that decreases resistance to do it. And then it can also be starting anywhere. It doesn't have to be perfect and perfectly in order. But if we tackle these tasks, at least pieces of it, it can make it more manageable. So often the hardest part of any task is starting that task, getting the gears turning. So when we reduce that starting friction, you're removing that biggest barrier between intention and action. And we don't need full clarity to begin. We just need clarity around a first step. And so momentum can help create clarity. Once you start getting into it, it makes it clearer of knowing where we're going and what we're doing. Improved prioritization is another big one. And so when everything feels urgent, nothing gets done well. So good prioritization is about making deliberate choices, actually making choices, not just reacting to what's loudest. And so with this, we want to be identifying what actually matters, separating high impact tasks from just busy work, really separating this out so that we can focus on it and mapping it out. Sequence your tasks, decide what comes first before the day starts. And so I've seen this often that in more in the moment procrastination, that when I am working with someone, if we're blocking off like productive time for students, maybe that's going to the library. For professionals, it's when are we going to block off time to try and get into a flow state and knock things off our to-do list? What we often do is a totally different concept we've talked about is decision fatigue and getting tired of making decisions of what to do. So if we separate out and make prioritization and the sequencing of the tasks we're going to do its own task, it actually sets you up to decrease procrastination in other areas. And then lastly, allocating time intentionally. So giving important tasks a real slot, not just leftover time. And then system four is to add in structure and accountability. So let's not rely on willpower and motivation alone. So external struggle can fill in the gap when our self motivation begins to run low. It makes follow through more consistent. Use time blocking, so pre-schedule focus windows that protect our most important tasks. Let's block off 3 hours, 2 hours, one full uninterrupted hour. It's a great way to also, hey, during this block, I'm going to put my phone somewhere else. So that way you're able to avoid the dopamine chaser. Check-ins, so regular progress reviews using some self-monitoring. Check in with yourself or an accountability partner, a peer, coach, someone to help you really be able to reflect and review. It helps prevent that avoidance and out of sight, out of mind. And you're checking yourself to make sure, hey, does it look like I'm being strategic with my delay, or am I going down some bad procrastination? And some other external support um, that can support you with this follow through and accountability. So, really understanding that with procrastination, it's not about willpower. You need better systems to set ourselves up for success when you find that procrastination is a challenge. So, better visibility so they don't disappear, better structure so starting doesn't require a burst of motivation, and better systems so that consistency can become easier than the inconsistency and the reactivity. And remember, procrastination happens to everyone. It's not about if, it's about how fast you notice it and how quickly you re engage. So, high performers don't procrastinate less, they simply develop systems and helping them so they have a shorter gap between noticing the delay and course correcting. So, what we're trying to do is notice it sooner, pattern recognition. So, we shorten the delay, then re engage faster so we can have a clear system to make it easier to jump back in. So the real goal is not never procrastinate. It's notice it, catch the pattern, understand it. Oh, sorry, understand it. What's driving the delay right now? Which of these forms of procrastination is manifesting? Adjust. Let's use the right corrective action, the right strategy, the right supports, so that we can address this and not procrastinate further, and then move forward with one small step. So imperfect action wins every time. There's a very interesting thing called the cult of imperfection, I believe it's called. And really, what it's about is a cult of progress. Forget exactly. I'm forgetting offhand, but the main aspect is perfection is actually our enemy. It's just about moving forward one step at a time. We can move towards perfection. You'll never achieve it, but we can move towards it. But trying to set that goal that we're going to be perfect from the get go is one of the big drivers of procrastination. So, as I promised, with a quick reflection, each of you, and feel free to share if you'd like in the chat. No need to, but as you're taking away, try to think back in what are patterns that you have found yourself slipping down? Which of these seven procrastination patterns shows up most often in your life? What's a task right now that you are procrastinating? How long have you been putting off this task? And then let's try and take that task with an understanding of how we're procrastinating, and let's try to define one first smallest possible step that we can take. And is it possible? We're getting a little later, but if possible, maybe we could take that first small step today. You don't have to solve everything today, but you can take one step forward to break out of that avoidance cycle. And then always, if you want support, building systems is easier with help. So knowing about procrastination is one thing, but building the habits and systems to actually change them consistently under real world pressure is another. And that's where structure and accountability can make all the difference. And so at New Frontiers, we are helping with designing personalized strategies by helping identify your specific patterns and the systems that address them, and then building in accountability to make sure we are addressing them. We are trying things, not perfection, but trying to chip away at this stuff, building a bridge between that gap between intention and action. And this can help lead to some lasting change because the awareness through this and building momentum that can outlast motivation. And if this is something that you want to talk further about, you can, of course, schedule a free discovery call with us. That is easily found on our website. So at nfal.net, on our contact page, you're able to schedule and book a free discovery call. We can happily talk through this presentation or specific procrastination challenges in your life. So I will leave that. If there are any questions, great. I see one. While other people are getting questions in, just wrapping up here. So your takeaway, really thinking about which of the 7 resonated most with you and the patterns. Any questions that you may have about the 4 systems, happy to address. And then next steps in exploring how to start applying this today. Thank you so much for anyone that is watching this afterwards. Appreciate it. If there are questions for those viewing afterwards on YouTube, feel free to leave a comment, reach out to us, and we'll help address them. Or my email is here at casey@nfil.net. Thank you so much.